So Rabbi, Sundays in general, did you take on that other?
For a few months, yeah.
Okay, we're gonna meet at 9 o'clock on Sundays?
Yeah.
Going forward, okay. I wasn't sure if that was just a one.
Right. It seems that Rabbi Adler's taking on a one semester in Harvard in Boston. So they asked me to fill in for him.
Okay.
Good, very good. So we're here on Daf Lamed, and we read the Mishnah of Shlosha Achim. Again, Shlosha Achim actually appears over and over again, so that doesn't really identify it. But we're talking about the Mishnah on the bottom of Daf Lamed Amud Aleph, Shlosha Achim. So if you recall, we had the case of three brothers, two of which are married to two sisters, and one of them is married to a Nochas. And we spoke about the case of Gerushin. What's the case of Gerushin? Let's say Reuven divorced his wife, right? Her name was Rachel. That's called in the language of the Mishnah, Girish Echad Mibale Ha'achios Es Ishto, Umeis. Who died now? Meis HaNosui L'Nochus. So Levi was married to Sarah, who's a Nochris. Levi died, and now Reuven, after he divorced his wife Rachel, now was Mekayim the mitzvah of Yibum with Sarah. So at this point, Reuven has only one wife, Sarah, Umeis. And now Reuven dies without any children, and his wife, Sarah, who was once the wife of Levi, now falls for Yibum to Shimon. So the Mishnah says, Zoe she amru v'kulon shebesu onisgashu tzorsei mutaros. Even though at one point in time we had a problem of achos ishto, meaning that Reuven was married to Rachel, who is Shimon's wife's Leah's sister, but that's not relevant anymore because Reuven divorced his wife Rachel, and it's only Sarah who fell for Yibum to Levi. And there's no reason why, it's only Sarah who had fallen to Yibum to Reuven from Levi, now falls for Yibum with Reuven's death to Shimon. Now, so same Mutaros, there's no reason why we should prohibit a Shimon, from the Mekayim mitzvah of Yibum, because there is no Erev over here. And we ask the question, what exactly is the Chiddush of the Mishnah? I mean, it seems so obvious. There was never a moment in time where Sarah was an Erva to Shimon, or for that matter, a Tsaras Erva to Shimon. Even though, again, Reuven, who died, was once, if you go back in history, he was once married to Rachel. But what relevance does that have? When Reuven dies, he's not married to Rachel. And what we suggested is that perhaps the Chiddush of this Mishnah is not what it says, but what it doesn't say. And we're going to try to be medayik from the Mishnah and conclude that there is a big Chiddush in this Mishnah. So the Gemara says the following. Taima, so we're about 6 lines up before the end of Daf Lamed Amud Aleph. So Sarah falls for Yibum to Shimon after Reuven's death. And we said in the Mishnah that nothing inhibits Shimon from being Mekayim the mitzvah of Yibum with Sarah. So Taima the Girish. But what's important here is the sequence of events as reported, as presented by the Mishnah. In the Mishnah's presentation, Reuven had divorced his wife Rachel before Levi had died. If you take a look carefully in the Mishnah says Geresh echad mibale ha'achioses ishto, and then umeis hanasi lenachris, and then Levi died. Right? Levi is married to Sarah, we said. Now, with the death of Levi, Sarah falls for Yibum to Reuven, and Reuven had already divorced his wife before the death of Levi. And at that point, when Sarah falls for Yibum to Reuven, she's not a Sarah to Rachel because Rachel's already been divorced. So in a sense, there was never even a possibility at any moment of time of classifying Sarah as a Sarah to Rachel, who's the Erva to Shimon, as an Achos Ishta. And the Mishnah seems to be saying that in this case, Sarah, when she falls for Yibum to Shimon, there's a heter Yibum. There's no Iser of Tzaras Achos Ishta. Let's be medayek from the Mishnah that if we change this all to the sequence of events in a way that Levi dies first and his wife Sarah falls for Yibum to either Reuven or Shimon, but we're focused more on Reuven now, and Reuven is married to Rachel. Shimon is married to Leah. So now, the first thing that happens here to begin the process of Yibum is the death of Levi. After Levi dies, Reuven decides to be Megarish his wife Rachel, and he's Miyabim Sarah. And now Reuven dies. Sarah now, as a result of the fact that Reuven was Miyabim Sarah, now Reuven dies, falls for Yibum to Shimon. Asura. In this case, there's no heter Yibum for Shimon to be Miyabim Sarah. Again, we don't know why yet, but that's the obvious diuk in the Mishnah, because Levi died first, Sarah fell for Yibum to Reuven and Shimon, and Reuven subsequent to that Nefila Yibum of Sarah gave a get to his wife Rachel, which means that at the moment of Sarah's Nefila for Yibum, at that moment, she was at Sarah to Rachel. Now, by the time Reuven dies, Sarah is no longer at Sarah to Rachel because Reuven divorced Rachel. He had to divorce her in his lifetime, right? He didn't get Lachem Bisa. So if we're asking the question, what's the Chiddush of the Mishnah? As we said before, the Chiddush of the Mishnah is not what it says, but what it doesn't say. The Mishnah should have told me a bigger Chiddush. That even if Levi's death predated the gerushin of we'll call it Reuven to Rachel, nevertheless, with the death of Reuven, Shimon is Miyabim Sarah. That doesn't say in the Mishnah. Mishnah didn't go that far. You know, that would have been a bigger chiddush, because that would have told me, even though Sarah at one point in time, subsequent to the Yibum that Reuven did with Sarah, at that moment in time, since Reuven had not divorced his wife yet, Sarah was a potential, at least Sarah's erva, meaning in the relationship to Shimon, because Rachel is an erva to Shimon. Why did the Mishnah tell me that case? And even in that case, where Sarah at one point in time had we'll call it a quasi status of Sarah's erva, nevertheless there is Yibum. That would have been a chiddush. But the Mishnah left that out. The Mishnah deliberately told me that before Levi died, Reuven had already divorced his wife, Rachel, which means that by the time Levi died and Reuven was Miyabim Sarah, Ashes Levi, Rachel was history, such that Sarah was never even a potential, a quasi-Tzaras error. Why I say potential Tzaras error, because Baruch Hashem, Reuven is still alive. And as long as he's alive, obviously, there's no Nefila for Yibum. And Tsaras Erva means a Tsar of an Erva that fell for Yibum. We don't just talk about it, Tsaras Erva, Glatt, the Lufterei. So he says, Hoya Mishnah, I'm reading the footnote here in the Masechet. He says, Hoya Mishnah Lomer Shesora Nochris Muteres Afilu Shalevi Hanosli L'Sora Hanameis Tchila V'Achakak Giresh Ruvenis Es Rachel. That would have been a bigger chiddush. That even though Sarah at some point shared a relationship with Reuven and Rachel, his wife, who is again an erva to Shimon as achos ishto, that would have been a chiddush. After huskika Sarah liyibu b'shacha Rachel eishes Reuven ha'osal Shimon oisa imo. Right at the moment that Sarah fell for Yibum, and now we're talking about falling for Yibum to Reuven, Rachel was married to Reuven, and Rachel's status vis-a-vis Shimon is that of Eshes of Achos Ishta. And nevertheless, Sarah falls for Yibum to Shimon with Reuven's death, and Muteres Sarah l'Shimon. That would have been a bigger chiddush. And Kolshke, we would have understood, had the Mishnah mentioned that case, that if at the moment that Levi died, Reuven had already divorced his wife, Rachel, previously, and there was no moment in time in which Sarah shared a marriage to Reuven together with Rachel, so therefore that goes without saying that Rachel falls for Yibum to Shimon and Shimon could be Miyavim. But the Mishnah should have told me a bigger chiddush, that even if at one point in time, namely when Reuven was Miyavim Sarah, he was still married to Rachel, so that at this point you can say that the status of Sarah is that of Sarah's erva. Nevertheless, right? Nevertheless, she's muteres l'siyavim l'shimon. That would have been a bigger chiddush. But from the fact that the Mishnah presented the case as such that Rachel was divorced before Levi died and before Sarah fell for Yibum, and Reuven was miyavim, meaning that Sarah and Rachel never shared any moment in time as marriage, as wives to the same Reuven, it implies that in such a case where Levi had died before the divorce, which Reuven gave to to Rachel, if Levi died first, which means that now Reuven is miyavim Sarah and he has another wife by the name of Rachel, who's an erva to Shimon, that gives and generates the status to Sarah of its Sarah's erva. That's the implication of our Mishnah, which again is a radical chiddush. Because we would have said everything depends upon Chas Nefila Libum. You wanted to find a woman and classify her as a Tsaras Erva. Well, did she fall for Yibum? The fact that historically, way back in the past, she shared the same, that's the husband with a woman who would be an Erva to the Yevamot, if her husband would die. I mean, that seems to be totally irrelevant. We were not interested in the moment that she was married to Reuven, to the deceased. We're interested in the moment where the deceased died and she fell for Yibum. Is she a Tsaras Erva? Okay, so that leads us to Rav Ashi. Rav Ashi Zoso Meres Yesh Zika Afilu B'Treach. Now again, we've in the past discussed the issue of Trei Achi as far as Zika is concerned. I mean, could there be a Zika to two brothers? And we call it, when Yesh Zika means we consider it as a Miktas Ishus, how can she be married to two people? But what I don't understand, this is what I want to try to flesh out with you, is why is Rav Ashi sort of deflecting our interest here, our main focus. Our main focus here is how to define Tzoras Erev. I mean, you're right. There's an issue of Zika and Treyachi, but that seems to be totally secondary. We have a primary issue here as to how to define Tzoras Erev. And I think the answer, the key to understand Rav Ashi, is what we call Hava Hatalia, meaning there are two issues that are interdependent. One is the status of Tzoras Erev, and the other is the question, the issue of Zika b'shnei ach. Although, again, at the surface of it, it sounds like two distinct, independent issues. So he says the following. And again, I'm reading the Masechet. He writes, in Treyachi, Eina muchletes liechad. You can't say that in two brothers, both of whom are Yevamot, she has an ishus to one of them to the exclusion of the other. So that the Zika is now partnered, it's equally shared by both brothers. That's for sure. Eina muchletes liechad. And he says the following. Sarah has a Zika to both Reuven and Shimon. When Levi dies, his wife Sarah falls for him, not just to Reuven. Again, we were putting all our eggs into Reuven's basket, but forget about Reuven for a moment. She falls for him to Shimon. And now we're holding each Zika. He says, Machmas Zika between Sarah and both Reuven and Shimon, she is considered, let's say, if we want to give Sarah the status of Tzoras Erev, because she's a Tzara to Rachel, right? Because at the time that Levi died, and Sarah fell for even to Reuven, Rachel was still in the picture. He hadn't yet divorced Rachel. Correct? That was the diuk that we made in the Mishnah. So therefore, Ilu hoisa Rachel kayemes tachas baila Reuven, in our case of the diuk, right, that we were medayik from the Mishnah, the case that's not mentioned in the Mishnah, where Rachel is still married to Reuven, that marriage is still viable. There has not been a get at the time of the Zika between Sarah and Reuven. Harehi nechsheves. He here, I think, refers to Sarah. Hitzarasa. B'nesra Sarah al Shimon Bala Shalea Achos Rachel Mishum Tzoras Achos Ishta. Omnom kasher huskika Sarah hanochus liyibum liachar sheruben kvar girishes Rachel Achos Leah lo nastet Tzoras Achos Leah Ishta shel Shimon b'muteres l'siyavim. I think the emphasis here is on the fact that we have with the death of Levi, we have a Zika that connects, that it binds, if you will, Sarah, Ashes Levi, to both Reuven and Shimon. And Reuven is married to Rachel. So if we validate the Zika between between Sarah and And Shimon, right? Because again, with Levi's death, Sarah falls for Yibum no less to Shimon than to Reuven. So now we have a situation where, let me just think it out, the Zika. Right. So let's say this. If Reuven is married to both Rachel and Sarah at the same time, let's read it again. Avol meis v'achakach giresh. If Levi died first, and now Sarah falls for even to both Reuven and Shimon, the achakach giresh. So I think when it says achakach giresh, what it means is that Reuven has not yet implemented Yibum. Why is that significant? Because if we want to set up a joint marriage, so to speak, between both Sarah and Rachel, both married together, to whom? To Reuven, then all we need is Zikas. We don't even need Kana. So since with the death of Levi, Sarah falls for Yibum to Reuven, and we're holding now Yesh Zika, therefore, Sarah becomes a Tsaras Erva, even if subsequently Reuven divorces Rachel. See, for some reason, which I can't figure out, the Gemara totally, what do you call it, ignores or de-emphasizes the issue here that at the time of Reuven's death, he was not married to Rachel. So that Sarah falls for Yibum to Shimon without Rachel. Rachel's out of the picture. And for some reason, the Gemara shoves that under the carpet. I don't know why. Why isn't that in the limelight? You know what I mean? The Gemara is putting all the emphasis here on one and only one issue, and that is there a moment of time in which both Sarah and Rachel are, in quotation marks, married to Reuven, and that's going to make Sarah into a Tsaras Erva. And that's where Zika comes into play. But the fact that Reuven divorces his wife, Rachel, that cannot cleanse or remove from Sarah the status of a Tsaras Erva. He's already become a Tsaras Erva. Which is strange because Tsaras Erva is halacha and Yibum. There's I don't know of any other dinim that are generated by Tsaras Erva other than Yibum. Maybe I don't know of it. And now Rav Ashi points out very well that if this diuk is correct and there's no possibility of Yibum to Sarah because Reuven did not divorce his wife until after Levi's death, so then we must be holding that Yesh Zichel Treyach, because with the death of Levi, Sarah fell for Yibum to both Reuven and Shimon. And we're recognizing the quasi issues of Zika between Sarah and Reuven, even though she falls for Yibum to Shimon as well. That's what I have over here. So I'm going to look in the notes if you have notes in your Gemara, but just give me a minute to read this. So if you can see if you have any better notes than I have, which has happened in the past. It says, Shas Nesuin Mapila Es Hayibur. Shenasit Soros Erba B'Nesuel Nesrali. Why he pins that Ashi? I mean, the whole Gemara is predicated on that assumption. Now, where was Rav Yirmiyah? Rav Yirmiyah was back on Daf Yud Gimel. We've already managed to forget Daf Yud Gimel. I say the royal we, but I mean myself. Shenesuin Mapilin. Does this sound familiar? At least vaguely? That B'shas Nesue Sarah Lil Levi Farnafal Yibum Lifnei Reuven. It's like a conditional nefila for Yibum. That if he dies without children, etc., then there's already a nefila for Yibum from now, from Shas Nesuin. And now we're going to translate that into Nesuin, into Zika terms. L'das Ravashi, ein nefila zu machshiva es Sarah ke'eshes Ruven sheteose Soras Rachel eshes Ruven v'teose al Shimon bal achos Leah mishum shenofla im Rachel ifnei Shimon machmazikasa ilu nisa leRuven she'eno m'nesivim atpilin el hamachas kideli osra Shimon tzrichem lahapi lapila machmas hanesim pamai echad nesui Levi Garmalach Shiva. All right. So in any event, I don't know if you have the same note that I have, but the Ritva is pointing out that this whole sugya that we're learning of Rav Ashi is predicated on an earlier sugya back on Daf Yud Gimel of Rav Yirmiyah, who says Nesuin Mapilin. So already there's quote unquote a quasi nefila for Yibum even during the Nesuin itself. From the moment of Nesuin, when she marries, your brother, whoever you are, right? Doesn't matter, right? That already is the beginning of the nefila for Yibum. And therefore, if at that moment there's already a nefila for Yibum, she's already at Tzaras Erev. Why? Because the live brother, right now they're both alive, but the live brother is married to the sister of the Yevam's wife, the sister of the Yevam's wife. So that when she, the Nachris, gets married, or in the case of Zika, if we hold the age Zika even to Shreyachi, is like an issue, is already at that point there's an appeal for Yibum. Again, it's all conditional on what happens down the line. But from the moment of the Suin, that's when there's an appeal for Yibum. That's Rabbi Yirmiyah on Daf Yud Gimel. And the Ritva is saying that Rav Ashi here is predicated on that Shita of Rav Yirmiyah. Do you have anything else to add? No? They don't mention the Ritva? No? This Ritva seems to be very, very fundamental. Okay, now let's see what the Gemara asks at this point. Says the Gemara, Rav Ashi, Kashid Rav Nachman. Okay, so now we have to remind ourselves of Rav Nachman. Let's just see. Nachman. Where is Rav Nachman?
Nachman's on the first mission.
How many lines down from the top? About 10? Oh, right. Yeah, okay. So let's see. Omer Rav Nachman, I think it's about 10 lines down from the top. Also Meres. Ein Z. What was that? Timer, the Ovid Be Maimar. Hello, Ovid Be Maimar. Is Locher Sibu Meinam Miyab. The reason why the Mishnah says Choletzes Bemes is because it's a Maimar case, right? The Mishnah mentions also a Maimar. Where was that? In line 5. Also bo Maimar. Holo Ovid bo Maimar. Right, so if Levi, who's married to Sarah, did not do a Maimar with Rachel, I guess because Reuven died first, is then is lo Ovid ba Maimar, then Sarah is not a Tsaras Erva, even though Rachel fell with the death of Reuven to Leah to Levi, for Yibum. So Rav Nachman's also Meres ain't Zika. Afil b'chad. So now the Gemara is pitting one mission against the other. Our Mishnah here on the bottom of Daf Lamed, according to Rav Ashi's interpretation, with the Mishnah on the top of Daf Lamed, according to Rav Nachman's interpretation. In the former case, Yesh Zika, Afil b'treyach. In the second, and in the previous case, which was the previous Mishnah of Rav Nachman's interpretation, it's Ein Zika. So now Rav Ashi has to somehow work it out that the previous Mishnah on the top of the Omud holds Yesh Zika. Again, let's go over the case. We have turn the page, the right page. Sorry. So we said that Reuven died. Okay, Reuven died, and his wife Rachel fell for Yibum to Levi. Levi was Miyabim, Reuven's wife Rachel, and then he died. Right, so Levi now dies as well. And Levi now has two wives. Right, he was Miyabim Rachel, Ashes Reuven, and he has his own wife Sarah. So these two wives, Rachel and Sarah, fall for Yibum to Shimon. So we now have a case of Erva V'Tzaras. Nobody needs Chalitza Yibum. Then the Mishnah says, Osa ba Maimar, ba Meis. So in this case, Levi did not complete Yibum with Rachel. He only started the process with Maimar. So Levi gave Rachel a Maimar, and then Levi dies. And the Mishnah Paskins, so again, with Levi's death, his wife Sarah falls for Yibum to Shimon, and his sort of wife Rachel falls for Yibum, a wife through Maimar, is in this case Nachris Choletzes Velo Misyabemis. In other words, we're going to recognize the Maimar as if it was a marriage relationship, which would make Sarah into a Tzaras Erev. So that's why we have to exclude the possibility of Yibum. On the other hand, she needs Chalitza because Maimar is not enough to create a Kinyan Dorais. And therefore, Sarah is not a Tzaras Erev. Let's see if that's enough information. Amalcha Rav Ashi, but then the Afagav, the low of it, but mine. Right, because Rav Ashi is holding Yesh Zika in our Mishnah at the bottom of the Yom. So if we're applying the principle of Yesh Zika, then with the death of Ruvain, Rachel is now Zkuka to Levi, which makes Sarah into a Tzaras Erev based on Zika. And that would be Rav Ashi's approach. But the Mishnah says Asava Maimon. And Rav Nachman was medayik for the Mishnah that the only reason why Sarah becomes a Tzaras Erev is because Levi did a Maimar with Rachel, implying that Zika itself is nothing. So Rav Ashi is now saying, "Who did Afagav Delo Avid Ba Maimar." Right, so he obviously has to come to grips with the question: why does the Mishnah mention Maimar? But according to the logic of Rav Ashi in reconciling the last Mishnah with the first Mishnah, Nachris Michlatz Chalza. So Levi dies, and now Sarah, his wife, falls for Yibum to Shimon, and there's no possibility of Yibum now. Why? Because we're holding Yesh Zika. So if we're holding Yesh Zika, that generates the status of Tzaras Erva to Sarah. Now again, why does Sarah need Chalitza? Let's just analyze that for a second. He says here, Rachel Eishes Reuven. Rachel Eishes Reuven. Nasta Tzarot Min Torah. So with the death of Levi, Rachel is out of the picture as far as Yibum is concerned. So again, why do we need Chalitza? I got it. So since Rachel is out of the picture, therefore Sarah should fall for Yibum, and therefore she needs Chalitza. On the other hand, she cannot have Yibum because she's a Tzaras Erva. Tzaras Erva because of what? Zika. Is that what we're saying? Because of Zika. So let's see. Yibume lo miyavna. Right, so we have a din of Tzaras Erva based on Zika. So he adds here, maybe you have it also in your commentary, Shetiknu Chachamim So we're holding now Yesh Zika on a Darabanan. Shetechoshev ke'eshes Levi machmasa. Meaning that when Reuven dies and his wife Rachel falls for Yibum to Levi, Levi has another wife named Sarah, and because of Zika, the Zika between Rachel and Levi, with the death of Reuven, that generates a status vis-a-vis Sarah of Sarah's Arab, right? Because Rachel fell for Yibum with the death of Reuven to Levi. And therefore both Rachel and Sarah are sharing that marriage. So that means that Sarah is the Sarah's Arab, and therefore there's no possibility of Yibum. On the other hand, we said that you need Chalitza because Zika is only Darabana. And therefore on a Doraisa level, we do not define Sarah as a Sarah's Arab. So now Rav Ashi has to come to grips with the Mishnah. I mean, Rav Nachman was the Daik in the Mishnah. Maimar. So why did the Mishnah introduce Maimar? This seems to be a total foreign element in the equation. Forget about Maimar. Maimar means that Levi went ahead and he did a Maimar Baruch. Is that correct? Did I get that right? Just 1 second. Let's go back to the Mishnah. V'asa ba Maimar. Levi lo konas es Rachel. Right? Levi could have been miyabim Rachel with the death of Reuven. Ela asa ba Maimar bilvat. Umeis achrichem. Why is this mentioned in our mission? Forget about Maimar. We have Zika. We don't need Maimar here. Maimar doesn't seem to change anything. That was Rav Nachman's point. Lafuke says Rav Ashi, mi Beit Shammai. The Amri Mamar Konen. The Mishnah wants to tell you an additional chiddush. If we would hold like Beit Shammai that Maimar is Konen, then, let's see if I get this right. If Levi did Maimar to Rachel, then Sarah would not need Chalitza. Let's see if that's correct. Kinyan Gomur, we're on the top now of Daf Lamed Amud Beis. Minat Torah. Oh, so if it's a Kinyan Gomur Minat Torah with Maimar, then Sarah becomes a Tsaras Erevim. Uli Divrehem. Oh, let's see. Let's see if we got this right. If we got this right, I'll be very happy. Uli Divrehem. Sarah Hanachris. Muteres li nose l'shuk below chalitz. Mishum she Tsaras Rachel achos Leah Eishes Shiva. Kamash Malon Delo Kibet Shammai. Which means that what? That Maimar is not a Kinyan Gomer. And we don't recognize Maimar on a Doraisa level. The Torah doesn't recognize Maimar. Which means that Sarah needs Chalitza. Again, she cannot fall for Yibum because we're holding Yesh Zika. And if Yesh Zika, then Sarah has the status of Tsaras Erevim, but that's all the Rabbanim. So that's not enough to remove the Zikas Yibum to Sarah when Shimon can't be Miyabim Sarah because she's a Tsaras Erevim because of Zika, but that's only the Rabbanim. So therefore, on a Deraisa level, she really should fall for Yibum. But since Yesh Zika D'Rabbanan, therefore we have to exclude Yibum. So all this will not be changed one iota by Maimar because we're holding against Beit Shammai. So therefore he says, Elasora Hanochris, Tzricha Chalitza. Right, according to Beit Shammai, Sarah doesn't need Chalitza. Why? Because with the Maimar to Rachel, Sarah becomes a Sarah's heir. But we're holding now against Beit Shammai, and therefore Sarah needs Chalitza. Af kisha also Levi Maimar berachel mishum min Torah rak he's kuka l'Shimon liyibum. Second, I lost the pronoun here. Rak he's a kuka l'Shimon. And he did a Maimar to Rachel. So the word he here is referring to Rachel. Right? So on a Deraisa level, the relationship between Rachel with the death of her husband Reuven and Levi is that of, to Shimon is that of Zika. So now Levi dies, and Rachel has a Zika relationship, which again we're saying is not a Torah relationship. So Yirak's kuka l'Shimon liyibum machvas misas Levi baila the ein he tzaras erva klal. Just 1 second. What does that mean? Ein he tzaras erva klal. Just 1 second. What do you mean, Eini Tzaras Erva Klal? We just said that she requires Chalitza, but there's no Yibum. Why is there no Yibum? Because of the Zika, which makes her into a Tzaras Erva. I'm not sure what he means when he says Eini Tzaras. Oh, on a Doraisa level, oh yeah, because the Torah doesn't recognize Zika. If the Torah doesn't recognize Zika, then Sarah is not a Tzara of an Erva. Because that Erva, namely Rachel, did not fall for Yibum. I mean, she was never married to Shimon at all. You know, right? When she falls for Yibum together with Sarah, right? When she falls for Yibum together with Sarah, Sarah doesn't have the status of Tzaras Erva because on a Deraisa level, there is no such thing as Zika. Okay. So I think we got that. Now the Gemara says, Rav Ashi, Rav Nachman Kasha, Rav Ashi. Oh, now the Gemara is switching it around. Because Rav Nachman insisted, he didn't have this Beit Shammai business here, so he insisted that only because of Maimar would there be a problem of Tzaras Erva as far as Sarah, and therefore she doesn't have a possibility of Yibum. But had there been no Maimar, then we would say ain't Zika. But what are we going to do with our Mishnah? Meaning the Mishnah at the bottom of Daf Lamed, which Rav Ashi proves is predicated on Yesh Zika. So now, according to Rav Nachman, there's an inconsistency between the top Mishnah and the bottom Mishnah. And again, let's just quickly go over the diuk of Rav Ashi. Rav Ashi was medayik that the case was that Reuven divorced his wife Rachel before Levi died, implying that if Levi had died and then Sarah falls for Yibum to Reuven, and Reuven is still married to Rachel because he hasn't yet divorced her, in that case, there would be no possibility of Yibum. Is v'chi tema. And perhaps you might say that hu adin afilu mes v'acha kirech. Maybe the Mishnah is lav dafka, I guess. And it wouldn't make any difference when exactly Reuven divorced Rachel, his wife, whether it was before the Misa of Levi or afterwards. And in both cases, Sarasa Muteres, right? So again, now we're faced with the fact that in the Mishnah here, it says Zuhi. Take a look at the last line in the Mishnah here, Adaf Lamed Amud Aleph on the bottom. It says Zuhi Sha'omru V'Kulan Shemesu and Isgarshu Tzarsei Mutaros. So the word V'zu is always a mute, meaning V'zu, and in this case, and we said in Rav Ashi's reference, in this case because what? Because Reuven had divorced his wife Rachel before Levi died and Sarah fell for Yibum. Elazu he lemute man. Because now you're telling me Rav Nachman, if Ein Zika, then it matters not what the sequence was. And even in a case where Levi died first and his wife Sarah fell for Yibum to Reuven, and then Reuven divorced his wife Rachel, that would be enough to be Mater Yibum, correct? Kulam Shemesu Niskashim Tosem Mutaros. So now you could the Yibum to Sarah's Muteres is then Zui Lemute Man. And the Gemara answers Lemute Konas the Acharkach Giresh. Okay, what does this mean? Konas hayovam es yevinto. He says, Kigon. So we have Reuven, Shimon, and Levi are brothers. Rachel and Leah are sisters. Reuven marries Rachel. Shimon marries Leah. Levi marries Sarah. Now Levi dies, and Sarah falls for Yibum to both Reuven and Shimon. Reuven now went ahead and he was miyabem Sarah. And then what happened was that after he was miyabem Sarah, he divorced his wife Rachel. Then Reuven dies. And again, we're holding like Rabbi Yirmiyah. You remember that was the Ritva, that we're holding that Nisuin Mapilu. So therefore, Sarah and Rachel become Tsaros because they share the same husband, Reuven, and then Reuven dies. So now Rachel falls the Yibum to Shimon, who's married to Leah. Therefore, Rachel is an heir of a Meshes Af. I'm sorry, Machos Nishto. And therefore, Sarah becomes a Sarah. And that's what the Zui is excluding when it says Zui Shalom Kulam makes this Gauch Sarah say Mutaros. Mutaros means without Chalitza. But now we're going to require Chalitza in a case where Sarah fell for Yibum to Reuven, and Reuven was miyabim her. Reuven was miyabim Sarah, which means now Reuven at this point is married to both Sarah and Rachel, and therefore when Reuven dies, what's the status here is now Sarah is a Tzaras Erva, which means that Shimon cannot be miyabim Sarah, but it means even more than that Sarah doesn't even need Chalitza. Because again, we're holding down Nisuin Mapilin. I'm assuming that Nisuin Mapilin according to Rav Yirmiyah is Doraisa. I don't know. Maybe that should be double checked. That's a whopper of a sugya here. So let's see, where do we get up to now? We're up to Hanicha, correct? Where is Hanicha? That's about 4 lines down from the top, correct? Now we're ready for a year. I'm just going to read the Gemara. I mean, we're over for today, but I just want to read the Gemara. He says, Hanicha isavar la kirab Yirmiyah. Now I'm hoping that this is the Rabbi Yirmiyah of Nesuin Mapila. Let's see. The Omar Tavra, Misha Shan Zulo Shan Su. Okay, we have to go through that. Haitada Sabra Misama Peles. Vahaitada. Haitada, I think, means referred to our Mishnah Sabra Nesuin Rishonim Mapila. Okay, good. So we'll pick this up tomorrow, but that'll force us to sort of do a chazar of what we did today. And then we'll get to the Mishnah here on Daf Lamed on Beis. So let's just make a note of where we're up to. Hinicha, correct? Is that right? Can you double check me on that? Hanicha. Which is, what is it, 4 lines down from the top on Daf Lamed on Beis. Okay, gentlemen? So I wish you a great day.